welcome to today's presentation of Managing Life Through a Pandemic and Natural Disaster, How We Are Really Doing. How are we really doing? A little bit about me. Keisha just mentioned that I am a licensed mental health counselor based in New York City. I've been working in the field of child and adolescent psychiatry for over 10 years, almost 15 years, specifically with children and adolescents in New York. I've worked with families, children in the juvenile justice system, children and families who have encountered ACS, our children protective services here in New York, as well as various other entities that are incorporated into the mental health system here. I'm currently working as the Associate Director of Administration for the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry in New York Health and Hospitals, Bellevue Hospital Center, and I've been in that position for almost 7 years. I also work in a private practice, and I have had my own private practice for 6 years in Brooklyn, serving my community members in need of emotional and psychological support, guidance, and empowerment through the journey of life. Can everyone hear me well? Keisha, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I just wanted to do a sound check, sorry. And so today we have a few objectives. I wanted to focus on including normalizing stress as a response to traumatic events, assisting us in identifying stressors in our lives, and creating a list of healthy coping mechanisms to help you through the daily stressors and recovering from the global trauma and impact of COVID-19. So what is stress? It's the body's response to physical, mental, and emotional pressure. It's a feeling people have when they are struggling with challenges related to finances, work, relationships, environment, and other situations. There are 3 types of stress: acute, episodic, and chronic. So the acute type of stress is the stress that we encounter on a regular basis. Sometimes it's more short-term, it's something more specific, like in a day or in the moment of time that might cause stress that we are challenged with in our daily lives. Episodic stress is more closely related to a specific event, such as COVID or the volcanic eruption that we have experienced, or you have experienced in Barbados. And it's triggered by a specific episode that we encounter a situation. And then chronic stress is a little bit more long-term, and it's something that people experience on an ongoing basis due to various challenges that they are having in their lives, regardless of the type of challenge. It's just ongoing, and they have extreme difficulty overcoming and facing those challenges. So in this slide, I have a picture of what we often hear, right? When we ask someone how they're doing, what do we often hear as a response? We hear fine, we hear good, we hear I'm okay. Oftentimes we'll hear someone say, I'm too blessed to be stressed. How many of us have actually heard that or said it in numerous occasions? You could feel free, let me just pause and say that this is an interactive presentation, so I expect people to log into the chat, feel free to have reactions. It's not all about me. I want to hear from the participants on the presentation as well. So again, how many of us have heard too blessed to be stressed or said it frequently in our interactions?
I have heard it.
You definitely heard it, right? But when you hear it, or even when you responded to it, how many of us have truly meant it? Because it has a connotation that makes people feel like you have no stress because you count your blessings. And counting our blessings is a wonderful thing, and it shows a moment of gratitude. However, our reality is very different. How many would agree that stress is a normal part of our lives?
I think it is.
Yes, it definitely is a part of everyone's life. I think it's just a matter of how we all deal with stress. And one of the most important parts of dealing with stress is acknowledging it, right? We know that it's natural and normal for us to have challenges in life. We know that we are blessed despite the challenges that we have in life. But the most important thing to do is acknowledge it so that you can then cope with it and meet the challenge that you're faced with. Sorry for the background noise. We are in New York City. It's a lively space. So next we have what I thought to be a cute little comic to express some of the things that we've been facing. We finally made it through 2020, and here we are in 2021. And this is an example of a man going to his what seems to be a doctor's checkup, and the doctor is asking him, have you been under abnormal amounts of stress? Not just regular stress, but abnormal stress, which gives the connotation that things have definitely been very different and extremely stressful. So this is a moment where I would like for some interaction in terms of responses from our live participants. Let's figure out ways to figure out ways that we are ourselves triggered by different things and what our triggers of stress are. So financial hardship, which seems like an obvious stressor, but it can it can present in various ways and manifest in different ways. There is no financial hardship that is greater than the other based on your own experience. So for someone, a stress trigger in terms of finances might be not having enough money to buy their child a new pair of sneakers. Another example of financial hardship is on a larger scale, not having rent or not having money to make up your mortgage payment that's due. Not having money to treat yourself, right? Some people become stressed over the inability to treat themselves and do something nice for themselves. Not having money for medication, the necessities in life that you might need. Work or career. So triggers of stress related to work and career are changes in your job, changes in your workload that you might be experiencing, and in addition to a loss of a job. Related to career, not knowing what type of career you want to go into. I think it's important that during this presentation, while it's a very general presentation and the majority of the audience members are adults, we do want to and stay true to my passion of children and adolescents and just be aware of some of the triggers of stress, not only in ourselves as adults, but as well as the children and the young people in our lives, the older people in our lives that also have stress and are easily triggered, varying on who they are and where they are in their lives. So going back to career, understanding that we have options, and it's sometimes finding our true career path is a journey that can be stressful and challenging. Intimate relationships, whether it's dating, it's marriages, it's going through the ups and downs of being in an intimate relationship. I'm not specifically speaking to domestic violence within intimate relationships, but that is also a more obvious trigger of stress for someone who is enduring that type of negative and violent relationship and emotional abuse. Another trigger of stress is parenting, right? We have parenting on the scale of parents that have the change of having a newborn in their lives and adjusting to the time differences in having to be up all the time and the additional stressors of managing themselves and a child, another being. Then we have the parenting levels of toddlers that are interactive and in everything, and you're trying to teach them and help them to develop. There's parenting of teenagers, which is a whole nother topic, right? Teenagers are a handful, as are each developmental stage. Helping them to navigate who they are becoming can be stressful, as they themselves are stressed in these moments. And then circling back to acknowledging that children and adolescents are people too, and things that you have gone through as an adult, you made a way and figured out a way to overcome things, but that doesn't take away from the stress that they're feeling in the current place that they are, and just helping them to acknowledge that you are understanding that stress is real for them too, even though oftentimes we'll say, oh, well, they don't have any bills to pay. What could they be stressed about? They actually have a lot of things that come across their paths that are very stressful and challenging for them. Right before I go to food and shelter, I just wanted to also circle back to parenting as it relates to adults who are caregiving for their parents, right? Being a parent of an adult is challenging. And then there's a circle in time where there's a time where your child then has to turn around and help to assist you and care for you. And that is a stressful trigger for some, and that being able to accept the help that your child is providing for you, and that you are now in some ways dependent on them for that care. Next trigger of stress is food and shelter insecurity. This is a stress trigger for many on a daily basis, but even more so as we focus on COVID. I'm sorry, could you please mute your phone?
Everybody remember to please
Hello?
put your computers on mute if you're not speaking.
Thank you. So food and shelter insecurity are definitely triggers of stress for many, whether it's that they're wondering where their next meal is going to come from. Maybe it's a family where the parents are trying to put pieces together to ensure that their children have food and enough and adequate nutrition to make it along with their everyday lives, to be able to learn. Or it's an elderly person who's living by themselves with a minimal income, and has to really think about how they're going to get their next meal and those type of things. I also wanted to mention shelter insecurity, and not taking for granted that, yes, many of us that are on the Zoom call are blessed with shelter and homes that we can call our own, but there are millions in this world who don't have shelter. And so that is a major stress trigger for them as they are seeking adequate housing and their basic needs on a daily basis. Another trigger of stress is the illness of yourself or a loved one, whether it's sudden or gradual. Dealing with illness is never an easy journey, and it's an ongoing trigger for anyone who is faced with their own illness, as they're worried about themselves, and as well as family members if they are a caregiver, or if you are a caregiver of a loved one who has become ill. Being able to be there for them, whether it's figuring out how to get to their appointments on a daily basis, or coordination of medication or coordination of their care, those are definitely stressors that are presented in our lives along the way. And then, as I just mentioned, being a caregiver of the ill, injured, or debilitated. Another stress trigger is the loss of a loved one, which triggers not only stress, but it's another process of grief and bereavement. But the challenge of dealing with this major loss in your life of a loved one and adjusting to their absence, and how to move on from their presence, their immediate presence in your world, can be very stressful. And I just wanted to take a moment to say that, acknowledge that losing a loved one can be very challenging, and that in no way should anyone else dictate how you grieve that person and the process that you need in order to grieve in a healthy way. There is no end time to grieving a loved one who has had an impact in your life, okay? And here we are, it's 2020 and we just went through the pandemic. This is just a brief slide to go over a time frame of how the pandemic has hit us globally. In January 9th, the World Health Organization announces a mysterious coronavirus-related pneumonia in Wuhan, China. January 23rd, Wuhan now under quarantine. On February 2nd, global air travel is restricted, which directly impacted the world. March 11th, WHO declares COVID-19 a pandemic and global lockdowns begin in various countries. On June 10th, the US COVID-19 cases reached 2 million, and September 28th, global COVID-19 deaths surpassed 1 million. October 19th, global cases top 40 million across the world. And then the ash. La Soufriere volcano in St. Vincent, West Indies erupts for the first time since 1979, destroying properties and depositing thick ash over 110 miles away, including the island of Barbados and Grenada. Roughly 20,000 people were displaced from St. Vincent, and with 40,000 of them living in shelters around the island. So the reason that I brought up this particular natural disaster is because it directly relates to many of the people on this call in Barbados and is a real life instance of how a natural disaster impacts our lives and our neighboring communities. While the volcano did not erupt on Barbados, you guys were definitely impacted by the amounts of ash that was deposited over a week or so by the eruptions, and that has disrupted the quality of life in many ways for you all down there, and impacting their air quality, the cleanliness of water, and just the day-to-day lives of then again having to be shut in after recovering from multiple shut-ins that you had to encounter due to COVID-19 outbreaks. So now I want to talk a little bit about this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a motivational therapy in psychology proposed by Abraham Maslow in 1943. So here we have 5 different categories of needs. With the reason that it's in a pyramid is because it starts as the theory is based on a foundational growth, right? So the theory suggests that the physiological needs are the foundation of all other needs and growth and fulfillment in your lives and development. So it starts from the bottom with physiological needs, safety needs, social needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization needs. So here I want to talk a little bit about the impact of quarantine and shutdowns on those same needs that Maslow identifies. So I'm only going to look at a few of them in each category, and hopefully in me identifying some of these needs, you're able to kind of take a moment and reflect on how you think they might have they might have been affected by COVID-19 and also the volcanic eruption. So as I discussed before, the physiological needs are the foundations of all growth and development, according to Maslow. So here I'm identifying food, water, shelter, and air as some of the direct things that were impacted by these different pandemics and natural disasters. So the supply of food, the growth and demand of food was definitely affected in terms of even the importation of food and the basic things that we've often take for granted and never would think that we would run out of or wouldn't have access to in these developed countries that we live in. Water. We have to be mindful of the water supply. If everyone remembers the mass chaos that we all encountered, no matter what country you're in regards to running to the supermarkets, running to BJ's, Sam's Clubs, to get water, to get toilet paper, to get cleaning supplies, and how often people became so stressed, they became a little bit of violent, as sadly so, in trying to provide for their families, because everyone wanted to make sure that their family's basic needs were going to be met during these shutdown periods. Shelter, we want to make sure that we have a roof over our heads and everything is safe, and also our air. So the air quality was jeopardized in COVID-19 in the sense that we've all been restricted to wearing masks. When did we ever think in life that we would have to wear masks to see each other, to encounter each other on a daily basis? Who would think that our children would have to go to school with masks every day? We always promote hand sanitizing, but in this case, it became a trigger of stress and anxiety in terms of the cleanliness that everyone had to maintain. In addition to the air quality being jeopardized by the volcanic ash that erupted over the islands, which was triggering for many of the populations who suffer with asthma and any other respiratory issues. Next, we have safety needs, which were questioned and impacted as it relates to the security and feeling that we have some sense of structure and order, sense of stability and predictability. All of that kind of was gone when COVID first hit and the global shutdowns began. No one knew what to predict. There was no stability in terms of what to expect. Security kind of was lost and order was lost in some instances. And in many instances, our governments played major roles in trying to recreate some sense of structure despite the shutdowns. Our social needs were definitely jeopardized. We were unable to connect with one another. We were unable to be together, right, and celebrate one another. We were unable to give affection to those who didn't live within our household. Intimacy was also challenged, and our displays of love and affection were jeopardized, and our need for affiliation, which is a part of our developmental structure, was also jeopardized, even in the sense of working environments, right? We are affiliated by the work that we do in many senses, and this social need was questioned. Next is our esteem need. And this relates, I think, generationally to our children, adolescents, as well as being adults. In dealing with the COVID pandemic, we had challenges in our academic structures, and people who were very close to graduation were very anxious and stressed about whether or not they would be able to meet their highest levels of achievement, which they had been on the journey of. It also impacted our sense of independence and not being able to go out and about. Many places had curfews and lockdowns. Some of us really strive to have a sense of prestige and dignity, which kind of was stripped from us during this quarantine and shutdown period. And then finally, at the pinnacle of the pyramid is self-actualization needs, where our exploration, play, unity, and self-fulfillment are questioned and challenged. This makes me think in terms of exploration, the inability to travel. How many of us love traveling around the world? I miss being able to go to Barbados and sitting on the beach. Nobody wants to quarantine for a week when you get there, and just being able to have a sense of unity and self-fulfillment. So how does stress show up for you? There are two different types of the ways stress can show up for us. One category is psychologically. And again, I want to emphasize that this is a universal generational component of how stress shows up, and we want to be aware of our young people and our older people and how stress shows up for them. So lack of motivation, exhaustion, irritability, impatience with others, trouble concentrating, difficulty sleeping, and altered judgment. Physically, how does stress show up? Our heart rates start to get rapid. We have high headaches and migraines, elevated blood pressure, muscle tension, nausea, stomach or digestion issues. Sometimes we experience chest pain, hair loss, and skin breakouts. Yes, not only teenagers get skin breakouts, adults can get them too in terms of our faces or even rashes on our skins. Eczema flare-ups can also happen in relation to being triggered by stress. So I just want to take a pause. I'm just going to go back, I'm sorry, to open up the chat and ask how stress shows up for some of us here on the presentation. If you are able to unmute yourselves as well, that's an option. Overeating. I see someone said overeating is definitely how stress shows up. Absolutely. Those sugar cravings in the days, comfort food, right? Bread and rice. Anyone else have want to contribute to how stress shows up for them?
I want to stay in the bed.
Staying in the bed, right? Cuddling up and throwing your covers up, maybe even reading a good book, but just kind of zoning out and not dealing with some of the things that are triggering our stress. Sometimes the escape is to isolate. Oftentimes the choice is to isolate away from. Someone else says irritability with others. We start to snap at people, right? When stress is showing up in our lives, and innocently so, people do not know what's going on in your life. But in that moment, it's so challenging within ourselves that we snap at someone for maybe something totally unrelated to what is really stressing us. Impatience, I'm sorry?
Overthinking.
Overthinking, absolutely. Overthinking about what it is that's challenging us, how we're going to get through it could be a thought of overthinking, what will go wrong. And I want to say again, stress is a normal factor of our lives. All of these different ways of how stress shows up is something that we can all relate to. Difficulty sleeping and getting good night's rest. I see feeling pessimistic about everything are all ways that stress shows up in our lives. Thank you so much for that participation. So next we have, how do we cope with and manage stress? Different ways that we cope with and manage stress in our lives. And these are not the only ways. These are just some of the ways that I wanted to highlight. Exercising, taking a long walk, swimming, going to the beach. Importance of eating balanced meals, especially when we just talked about being stressed and overeating, eating our favorite ice creams, chips, or our favorite breads, can also trigger more stress, right? Because we're not eating healthy and the sugars that we're adding to our bodies are not helping with our hormones. Listening to music, praying and meditating, journaling, taking a break or taking a nap, being okay with asking for help to help manage your stress, knowing that you don't have to do it all alone, whatever it is that is challenging you, asking for help and guidance is important. Sometimes creating a plan or a to-do list is also very beneficial in just kind of like getting all your thoughts out. I like to call it a brain dump when I start to personally overthink and I need to figure out a plan to kind of ease some of the stress that I'm feeling or the anxiety that I might be feeling. Having some positive self-talk. Oftentimes when we're feeling challenged or overwhelmed, the negativity seeps in and we forget how great we are. And we need to remind ourselves of that more than receiving it from anyone else. reading a book, spending time and connecting with loved ones, playing with your pets, or reflecting on favorite memories and joyful moments. I really want to emphasize that one as it relates to losing a loved one. And then I am a definite believer in laughter and managing stress. And that's like the magic remedy for many of my family members on the call. And finally, we have the value of empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Knowing that everyone deals with stress and everyone deals with stress differently. What I might be going through, you could have gone through and managed it in a different way does not necessarily mean that you managed it any better than how I'm dealing with it, nor should it mean that what I am going through is not, should not be acknowledged as a challenge. I think oftentimes we become a little judgmental in thinking, oh, well, I lived through that, or I went through that already. It's not that serious. Or I know somebody who was sick, or I know somebody who lost their parent and they bounced back. You know, it's not a big deal. You don't know how stress affects anyone, just like no one understands how stress is affecting you. You don't know how long it takes for people to get through a challenge and to accomplish whatever it is that they're going through. And I just wanted to emphasize in this slide how important it is to be kind, because you just never know what someone is going through. We talked about irritability, we talked about snapping at someone and not having patience. Take a moment and reflect on the moments when you yourself are stressed and wanting to have an empathic ear to listen to you, maybe not necessarily to guide you, but to tell you what to do, but just to listen and just acknowledge that you are in this stressful space and you will make it through. So this quote says, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about." And that's quoted by Wendy Mass. And here we are at gratitude. I think my theme for 2021, after going through so much in 2020, is to lead my life in 2021 with gratitude. And it circles back to just not knowing what people are going through and understanding the blessings that we have in life of the things that you and I have both made it through. So in this moment, I would like to open up another interactive moment for us to just look at this slide, if you can see it well. It's comprised of a lot of different words. And so when you hear the word gratitude, if you could, again, either enter in the chat or unmute yourself and think of, as you think of and identify the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word gratitude. What are you grateful? One of the things, I know there are many, that you are grateful for.
Family.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm grateful for family.
Family, absolutely. Is
And
there anything
friends.
else? Friends. Mm-hmm.
I'm
Life.
grateful for memory of things in the past, especially
Absolutely.
those things that are not so available now.
Absolutely. So memories of things that you don't have as easily, you don't have easy access to as you did before. I heard someone also say that they're grateful for life. Absolutely. When we have lost millions of people due to COVID in just 1 year, we're thankful for, and losing people of all ages, right? Oftentimes we think of losing someone who is elderly, but unfortunately, death has no age. So just being grateful for life, that we are all here together. We have been granted with another day to share with this wonderful Zoom presentation with all of us. Thankful for, I see, commitment and opportunity to be around those I love and who love me. Anyone else before? Grateful for kindness, absolutely. Okay. And I just wanted to close by quoting John F. Kennedy. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I hope you were able to learn something from this presentation, but also have more moments of awareness and gratitude as we continue to encounter the stresses in our lives. Take a moment to remember and reflect on the coping mechanisms that we discussed, and find the ones that work the best for you. Again, what works for me might not work for you, but embrace what works for you as it continues to work for you. And we move through this journey of life. Thank you.